The battle to drive ISIS from its Iraqi stronghold Mosul got off to a raucous start. Hundreds of Iraqi armored vehicles raced to the front lines. In most places, ISIS pulled back, but not always, sending at least 7 car bombs to attack Iraqi and Kurdish columns. This is the defining battle of President Obama's war on ISIS, and it's being coordinated here in this joint operations room. Iraqi officers on one side, their American advisors on the other. The Americans control the skies, have about 5,000 troops in country, and have been launching artillery and airstrikes to back up the Iraqi advance. While the Americans weren't authorized to talk to us, the Iraqi ground commander says so far coordination is working well.
The Americans and the Iraqi, one team.
This base, Kiara West, is now home to hundreds of American troops. They're working hard to fix the runway, dug up by ISIS backhoes. As soon as the holes are filled in, American planes will land here to support Iraqi troops in Mosul. Taking Mosul is such a high priority because Mosul is ISIS's last stand in Iraq, the biggest city it holds, a symbol of ISIS power, attractive to would-be terrorists.
An aid group says the battle around Iraq's northern city of Mosul has forced thousands of residents to flee to Syria. Save the Children says over the past 10 days, Al-Hol camp in northern Syria has received 5,000 people fleeing from the Mosul region. About 1,000 people are waiting at the Iraq-Syria border as more arrive. The head of Save the Children has described the conditions at the camp as one of the worst ever seen, with no access to clean water and proper sanitation. Tariq Kadir has warned of the risk of disease outbreak at the ill-equipped and littered camp that's been flooded with refugees.
After leaving a trail of death and destruction in Haiti, Hurricane Matthews cut a swath through the southeastern coast of the U.S. The storm has left at least 1.5 million homes and businesses without power in the U.S. It has claimed 4 lives in Florida and killed 6 more in the states of Georgia and North Carolina. Governors of Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas have declared a state of emergency and urge the residents to stay indoors. The hurricane has killed at least 877 people in Haiti alone and destroyed some 80% of homes in the south. Cholera has also broken out in the Caribbean country in the wake of the hurricane, killing at least 13 people.
So we're headed west right now to take a look at part of the island that we're hearing was hit the hardest by the storm. Vous allez bien? Bien. Oui? Bien. Comment ça va la ville? How is your house?
My house broke, they go down, everything going.
Everything's gone.
Going.
Yeah.
Yes,
It was a day of rage in Yemen's capital, Sana'a. Hours before, warplanes from a Saudi Arabian-led coalition had bombed a funeral gathering in the city, killing more than 140 people and injuring more than 500 others. Protesters outside the UN building railed against an international community more interested in stopping Syria's conflict than Yemen's. We came out to the United Nations today to call for our human rights and to denounce this unprecedented massacre that took place yesterday at the Morning Hall. Where are the human rights? Where is the UN? Where is the world? We call for the forming of an international independent committee to investigate the crimes of the Saudi aggressors, the crimes they have committed against the Yemeni people, and the latest of these crimes is the mother of them all, the crime at the funeral hall, which happened yesterday. The Saudis said they're not guilty of the attack, which was caught on film, and they've promised an investigation. Meanwhile, a White House spokesman said America's support of Saudi Arabia did not amount to a blank check. The Yemen civil war has killed more than 10,000 people and displaced more than 3 million.
This hall was where they came to shed their tears. But Saturday's funeral turned into a scene of carnage, emergency workers describing a lake of blood.
This is a war crime on humanity. This was a funeral for one man in Sana'a, and now it has turned into a funeral for tens of Yemenis. Hundreds of people were killed.
Mourners were saying goodbye to the father of rebel Interior Minister Jalal al-Rawashan. Little did they know their own deaths would soon follow.
The planes struck twice while they were at the wake. We don't know how many victims there are, but there are a lot of civilians' casualties.
As the building collapsed, firefighters worked to save anyone who might have survived. Others had the job of collecting body parts. Those who stood any chance of living were brought to hospitals.
It's the second time in just 4 days missiles have been fired at the American destroyer, the USS Mason. The suspects behind the brazen attacks? Militias backed by Iran. The latest incident began around sundown tonight. At least one missile was fired from an area in Yemen controlled by Iranian-backed rebels, the Houthis. In rapid response, the Mason deployed its own missiles as defensive countermeasures. U.S. officials did not confirm if they scored direct hits, but no missiles reached the Mason. The USS San Antonio, an amphibious ship, was also in the vicinity. The Mason was also fired upon over the weekend. No Americans were hurt in either attack. One possible motive for the targeting of American ships? U.S. support for Saudi Arabia, which has been bombing the Iranian-backed rebels since last year. 140 people were killed after this airstrike on a funeral on Sunday. Hours later, the USS Mason was attacked. The incidents against the American ships, now a topic at a national security meeting at the White House.
The trigger is going to be when the next missile is fired, and that may very well be tomorrow.
Tonight, the urgent question, How will the U.S. respond to an attack that was potentially directed by Iran?
We haven't done a movement like this with this type of organization through Europe since World War II. And what you see now is an entire regiment rolling all the way to Estonia.
I'm looking forward to fulfilling our mission, which is to reassure our NATO allies and deter our enemies.
The Russian Defense Ministry has announced the deployment of the Iskander-M missiles to the western border of the country. The missiles have been sent into Kaliningrad region that borders Lithuania and Poland. This is the second time nuclear-capable rockets are moved to Kaliningrad since 2015. Defense Ministry says this is part of routine drills involving such military hardware across the Russian territory. NATO members Poland and Lithuania, along with the United States, have reacted angrily to the deployment. Poland described the move as very alarming. Lithuania accused Moscow of seeking concessions from the West over Syria by sending the missiles near its border. And the U.S. has called the deployment Moscow's political gesture to show displeasure with NATO.
Overseas this morning, a violent scene outside the U.S. Embassy in Manila. A police van rammed into a group of protesters who had turned violent while demanding U.S. forces leave the Philippines. Nearly a dozen people have been injured.
I announced my separation from the United States. America has lost me. And will I realign myself in your ideological flow, and maybe I will also go to Russia to talk to Putin and tell him that there are three of us against the world: China, Philippines, and Russia. It's the only way. Instead of helping us, ang unang tumira itong State Department. So, you can go to hell. Mr. Obama, you can go to hell. EU, better choose purgatory. Puno na sa impyerno. Bakit ako matakot sa inyo? Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now, there is 3 million, there's a 3 million drug addicts. There are. I'd be happy to slaughter them. At least, if Germany had Hitler, the Philippines would have, but, you know, my victims, I would like to be all criminals to finish the problem of my country and save the next generation from perdition.
These islands don't look like much, but they're at the centre of a simmering dispute about who owns them. In all, 7 countries have overlapping claims to islands in the South and East China Seas, and there's one common player, China, which has been jostling with its neighbours over maritime territories for more than a century. But recent tensions have threatened to boil over, potentially dragging in the United States and even prompting talk about possible war. So here's the situation. China claims more than 80% of the South China Sea within a border it calls the 9-dash line, whose legitimacy it says is proven by a 1940s map. About a decade ago, countries started making formal claims under new UN rules. That led to a rush of moves from several nations to show ownership. China got the most attention. It started to build islands, installing runways and deep water berths. That led the Philippines to challenge China's claims in an international tribunal at The Hague. The Philippines won the case in July 2016. China's reaction? The award is null and void and has no binding force. The reaction of the US?
The United States will stand with allies and partners in upholding fundamental interests.
Washington endorsed the ruling and called for peaceful resolve. Beijing says it has no intention of preventing commercial traffic, but is simply protecting its territory. 1,000 miles north in the East China Sea, China's also locked in a dispute with its age-old rival Japan over another rocky outcrop. China calls them the Diaoyu Islands. Japan calls them the Senkaku Islands. The US doesn't take a formal position on their sovereignty, but in 2014, President Obama vowed to defend them. So far, the dispute's been confined to jostling for position by ships and aircraft. Here's the argument. There's one big incentive for countries like China and Japan to stay friendly. It's called trade. The South China Sea is a critical artery of global commerce, hosting $5 trillion of trade every year. On the other hand, given how quickly China's been building its military positions in the South and East China Seas, and how nervous that's making everyone, some analysts say there's a significant risk of armed conflict, perhaps even as a result of miscalculation or a mistake. The US has responded to China's island-building ways by upping patrols of its warships and surveillance planes. But greater resolve may mean greater risks for the US and for the region.